So, listen to this. Everyone thinks becoming a star overnight is the dream, the perfect story, the moment everything finally clicks. But what if that's not entirely true? What if rising too fast doesn't give you an advantage, but quietly puts you in danger? Because in football, there is a rhythm to growth. Players struggle, fail, learn, adapt, and slowly earn the right to carry expectations. But every once in a while, someone skips that entire process. Someone goes from being almost invisible to being absolutely essential. And when that happens, it doesn't just change their career, it changes everything around them. That's exactly what happened to Cole Palmer. One moment, he was just another talented player sitting on Manchester City's bench. The next moment, he was Chelsea's most important player. Not gradually, not naturally, but instantly. And that sounds like success. It looks like success. But if you look closer, it raises a much more uncomfortable question. What happens when football gives a player everything before he's ready for it? At first, this feels like one of those stories football loves to celebrate. A young player leaves a dominant team where opportunities are limited, joins a struggling club, and suddenly proves that he was always good enough. It's the kind of narrative that makes everything look simple. All he needed was a chance. All he needed was trust. And now he's showing the world what he can do. But this story isn't really about opportunity. It's about timing. Because Cole Palmer didn't just arrive at Chelsea and find space to express himself. He arrived at a club that was searching for identity, searching for stability, searching for someone to make sense of the chaos. And without anyone planning it, without anyone announcing it, that responsibility slowly landed on him. Not after years of development, not after building experience step by step, but almost immediately. And that's where this story becomes something else entirely. Because when a player doesn't grow into responsibility, but instead has it placed on him too early, the question is no longer about talent. The question becomes whether football is asking too much too soon. Cole Palmer was never supposed to be the main character. At Manchester City, he was part of a system that didn't rely on individuals to define it, a system that was already complete before he even had the chance to prove himself. Surrounded by players who dominated possession, controlled tempo, and dictated games at the highest level, Palmer existed in the background, learning, adapting, and waiting for moments that rarely came. He had the technical ability, the composure, the kind of quiet confidence that made him stand out to those who paid close attention. But he wasn't the one people were talking about. He wasn't the next big name fans were demanding to see every week. He wasn't treated like the future of the team. And in a way, that shaped him. Because at City, young players aren't rushed. They are protected. They are developed slowly, carefully, almost deliberately kept away from pressure until they are fully ready. Palmer was growing inside that environment, understanding the game at a deeper level, but without the burden of expectation. And that's important, because expectation changes everything. It changes how you play, how you think, how you react to mistakes. At City, Palmer didn't have to carry anything. He didn't have to fix problems. He didn't have to be the difference, but that also meant something else. It meant he never truly experienced what it feels like to be relied on, to be the one a team looks at when things go wrong. So when he left Manchester City, it wasn't just a transfer. It was a shift from one reality to another, from a system that protected him to one that would soon depend on him far more than anyone expected. The move to Chelsea didn't feel like a defining moment at first. It wasn't treated like a statement signing. It wasn't surrounded by massive expectations, and it certainly didn't come with the pressure that usually follows a player meant to change a club. If anything, it felt like just another transfer in a long list of Chelsea rebuilding decisions, another young talent brought in as part of a bigger plan that nobody fully understood yet. And that's what made it so easy to overlook. Because when Palmer arrived, Chelsea were not a stable team. They were inconsistent, unpredictable, and still searching for an identity that had been lost over multiple seasons of constant change. There was no clear structure, no clear hierarchy, and no single player truly controlling the direction of the team. And at first, Palmer was just part of that chaos. He played, he contributed, but nothing suggested that he would suddenly become the center of everything. But then, things started to shift. Not dramatically at first, but noticeably. He began to take responsibility in moments that usually belong to more experienced players. He stepped up for penalties. He demanded the ball in tight situations. He made decisions under pressure that didn't look like the decisions of someone still adjusting to a new team. And slowly, without anyone announcing it, Chelsea began to lean on him. Not because they planned to, but because they had to. Because in a team full of uncertainty, Palmer looked certain. In a system that lacked clarity, he brought simplicity. And in games where everything felt unpredictable, he became the one thing that felt reliable. And that's where the conflict truly begins. Because this wasn't a player gradually earning his place. This was a player being pushed into importance by the absence of everything else around him. And the more he delivered, the more that responsibility grew. The more he scored, the more he assisted, the more he became involved in every decisive moment, the harder it became for Chelsea to imagine functioning without him. And that's the problem. Because once a team starts depending on you like that, there is no going back to being just a promising young player. You are no longer developing. You are performing. You are no longer learning quietly. You are being judged every single game. And for Cole Palmer, that shift happened faster than anyone expected. And this is where the story stops being abstract and starts becoming undeniable. Because what Palmer did at Chelsea wasn't just impressive for his age, it was structurally important for the team itself. You could see it in the numbers, but more importantly, you could feel it in the way Chelsea played. He wasn't just contributing, he was deciding. Goals, assists, penalties, key passes, moments where the game slowed down for him while everything around him seemed rushed. And that difference matters, because there's a gap between being talented and being relied on. Palmer crossed that gap almost instantly. He became Chelsea's primary penalty taker, a role that doesn't just require technique, but nerve, consistency, and the ability to carry pressure in the most visible moments of a match. And he didn't hesitate. Game after game, he stepped up, converted chances, and reinforced the idea that he was now the one player the team trusted when everything was on the line. But it wasn't just penalties. It was the way he positioned himself between lines, the way he slowed the tempo when others rushed, the way he made decisions that looked simple but came at exactly the right moment. There were matches where Chelsea struggled to create anything, and yet, somehow, Palmer would find a solution. A pass that opened space, a movement that created confusion, a finish that changed the direction of the game. And gradually, those moments started to define Chelsea's identity. Not through a system, not through a collective structure, but through one player's ability to impose clarity on chaos. You could even hear it in how people talked about the team. When Chelsea played well, Palmer was central. When they struggled, the question became why Palmer couldn't influence the game more. And that shift in narrative is everything. Because once the conversation moves from he's doing well to the team depends on him, the expectations change completely. He was no longer just a breakout player. He was becoming the reference point, the standard, the solution. And that's a dangerous place for any young player to be. Because the more consistent he looked, the more people forgot how early he was in his career. The more composed he appeared, the more they assumed he could handle anything. And the more he delivered, the less room he had to fail. At least, that's what it looked like on the surface. But beneath that consistency, beneath those numbers and those moments, something else was quietly building. Something that didn't show up in statistics, but would eventually shape the direction of his story. But this is the part nobody really talks about, because everything we've seen so far can be interpreted as success. Fast growth, big impact, decisive performances. It all fits the narrative of a player who was simply waiting for the right moment to explode. But what if that's not what's happening here? What if Palmer isn't just rising, but being pushed? Because there's a difference between a player becoming important and a team needing him to be important. And at Chelsea, that line became blurred very quickly. This wasn't a carefully built system designed around his strengths. This wasn't a gradual transition into leadership. This was a team searching for answers and finding them in the one player who looked calm enough to handle the chaos. And that changes everything. Because when a player grows naturally, he learns through failure, through inconsistency, through moments where he can disappear without consequences. But Palmer didn't get that phase. He didn't get to quietly figure things out. Every touch mattered. Every game mattered. Every performance reinforced the idea that he was now essential. And that's the twist. Because what looks like a perfect breakthrough might actually be an incomplete development. Not because he isn't good enough, but because he hasn't had the time to become what people already expect him to be. And this is where the story becomes bigger than Cole Palmer himself. Because modern football has a pattern that repeats more often than people like to admit. Clubs in transition, systems that are unstable, teams searching for identity. They don't just build solutions, they latch onto them. And when a young player shows composure in chaos, he doesn't just become useful, he becomes symbolic. Palmer is not just performing well for Chelsea. He represents stability in a team that doesn't have much of it. He represents clarity in a system that is still evolving. And that kind of role doesn't come with patience, it comes with expectation. The media amplifies it, the fans rely on it, and suddenly the narrative around the player shifts from development to dependency. And that's where modern football becomes dangerous, because it accelerates everything. Careers, expectations, criticism, pressure. A player can go from promising to essential in a matter of weeks, and once that shift happens, there is no reset button, there is no step back. And we've seen this before. Players who rise too fast, who become the centre too early, often carry a weight that doesn't show immediately. It builds slowly, quietly, until one moment exposes it, not because they lack talent, but because they were never meant to carry that much, that soon. And Palmer is now standing in that exact position, not just as a player performing well, but as a player holding together a story that is still unfinished. And eventually, it all comes down to moments. Not trends, not narratives, but single moments where everything feels heavier than usual. A penalty in a tense game, a chance to decide the result, a situation where the entire stadium holds its breath and looks at one player. And more often than not, that player is Cole Palmer. He walks up, calm, almost detached from the pressure around him, and delivers. Again and again, he turns uncertainty into something predictable. And that's what makes this so compelling, because in those moments he looks ready. He looks like someone who belongs there, someone who has always carried this kind of responsibility. But that's exactly what makes it dangerous, because just because a player can handle pressure doesn't mean he should have to carry all of it. And in those decisive moments when everything depends on him, you can start to feel the weight building. Not visibly, not dramatically, but quietly. Because every time he succeeds, the expectation grows. Every time he delivers, the margin for error shrinks. Until eventually, it's no longer about whether he can step up, but whether he can keep doing it forever. And maybe that's the real story here, not whether Cole Palmer is talented, because that part is already clear, not whether he can perform under pressure, because he's already proven that too. The real question is something much harder to answer. What happens next? Because football has a way of moving on quickly. It builds players up, places them at the centre of everything, and then asks them to keep proving it again and again without pause. And when that process happens too fast, it doesn't always end the way people expect. Maybe Palmer will grow into this role, maybe he will become exactly what Chelsea needs him to be, maybe this is the beginning of something extraordinary. But maybe the truth is more complicated than that. Maybe he isn't ahead of his time. Maybe he's just being asked to live a chapter of his career that was never meant to come this early. And that's why this story isn't finished yet. Because what we're watching right now isn't the end of Cole Palmer's rise. It's the moment that will decide what kind of player he becomes.